Oh, the night that Patty Murphy died is a night I'll never forget. Some of the boys got loaded drunk and they ain't got sober yet.
Welcome to the On Deck Show, a show that looks at people and organizations that are doing things outside the scope of normal in their own way to make things better for other people. Today, we talk with Tom Ponting, who's arguably one of Canada's most historic swimmers, one, if not the only swimmer to medal in 3 consecutive Olympic Games. Originally from Montreal and lived in Calgary, now lives in Charlottetown and head coach of the Bluefins. This song from Great Big Seas, a little ode to him. Perhaps April Wine might have been a better choice given the fact that he's from Montreal. But regardless, welcome, Tom. Hey, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
So, Great Big Sea, hopefully that was, a reasonable ode. I wasn't sure whether or not I should go far east, Montreal, or far west. So.
Oh, love the maritime type music, that's for sure.
Good.
The shanties.
Yeah, and nothing better than Great Big Sea. So I wanted to thank you for joining us. This interview was a pleasure to prepare for, because I got to do something that I kind of forgot that I love to do, which I went back to and watched archive videos of old Olympics and some races, and like a time where it was really, like, we didn't have all the hoopla and like there wasn't all this fancy technical spacesuits and all that stuff. Like, it was just good, hard swimming and racing, and it was awesome to watch. And as I mentioned to you earlier, growing up in Montreal, names like Tom Ponting, Alex Baumann, Victor Davis. I mean, like, these were names that used to give you goosebumps when you used to get to swim meet and you were in finals and you had the national anthem playing and you were 12 years old and you're like, I'm going to go, right? And these memories of you guys, the pictures that would come through the newspaper, the Gazette, of, like you guys on the blocks cheering and, winning medals, like, it was ultra inspiring. So it was really, a great opportunity to prepare for. So again, thank you. And also I want you to know that, I grew up, with your picture and looking up to you. So.
Oh, thanks for having me. And it's amazing that you say that, because that's how I got into it too. I had an uncle that was 2 blocks away from the Big O when they built it, and I would visit him and think, oh, one day I'm going to do that. And certainly I watched, the Graham Smiths and the Gail Amandrudes and the Shannon Smiths and Becky, and it was amazing for me as well. So it's amazing that each different generation picks up that baton and moves on and says, oh, that was so much interesting because it was more innocent, or it was more archaic, and the equipment was crazy. And that's exactly how I got into it too. I just wanted to wear that Maple Leaf t-shirt.
Anyway, so just I want to dive into the questions, because I want to make sure that we get as much from this interview as possible.
Sure.
And so you're born in Montreal. When did you swim in Montreal at all, or did you move to Calgary early enough that all your swimming was done in Calgary?
So I did swim a little bit in Montreal with Rio, which you guys would know as POM or something else. It's changed along the ways, but Régie des Installations Olympiques was the pool underneath, and we swam under the stands, not the big pool, but the one under the stands. And we used to get in through the velodrome back in those days. Then I did some swimming in my area, which was Saint Hubert. But then most of my swimming really was in Calgary from 10 years old till 28 years old was in Calgary.
I guess in Calgary, you started with the Calgary North YMCA is what you said?
That's right, North YMCA Torpedoes.
Fair enough. And was that the majority of your sort of youth and age group career, or did it?
Strangely, no. I got into that because we had moved just after the Olympics, and the coach there had just gone to the Olympics, came back and said she wanted to do a swim team. So I was there for a year, maybe a year and a half. We were part of the YMCA program. And there was a South Calgary Y as well, South Calgary Y Patriots, but quickly grew out of 4 lanes, 25 yards, quickly grew out of that. Not because I was any good, but it just got crowded. There was a lot of people. So then I moved to a small team called Thornhill, which was by my house. And then from Thornhill, I went to UCSC when it developed in 1980. So I would have been 14, turning 15.
And at UCSC, it was right away with Derek Snelling?
Oh, hell no. No, I wasn't very good. If anything, I hope to be a good example of just be patient and wait, because I used to get kicked out of workouts. I couldn't do them. I was blind, so I'd swim, diagonally across the pool, smash my face into the wall. My strokes weren't very good. They never were actually very good. I just got better at the bad stroke. But at 15, when Derek came and they started UCSC, I was swimming under Jim Fowley, who you would know from your Australia. And so Jim had me at 14, 15, 16. And then at 16, everybody else in my lane made nationals. There was 5 of us in the lane. The other 4 guys made nationals. They came, the newspaper came, did a big article and talked about us. We did all these quotes. They took pictures of us. Then a newspaper article came out and they had cropped me. And you got to remember, today it's easy to crop on your digital phone. In those days, you had to physically crop people out, like with a piece of paper. And I was cropped out. And the article was about the Fabulous Four. And I was like, what? So, that was the end of that. So that summer, I went on a swim meet on my own because Jim went with the good swimmers. Derek was with the best national swimmers. My dad took me to a meet in Edmonton. And because of swimming well there, the next year I got into Derek's group and won my first nationals, won a gold medal in my first nationals. So that 10-month period was a real wake-up call for me that everyone had moved on and the Fab Four were making it and I wasn't. So that put a big fire under me. And Derek saw that. Derek believed in me long before I did. And he trained me for a year as if I made nationals. So when I finally got there, I had trained like them. I didn't train pre-nationals. I trained with the best of the best. So Graham Smith, Jay Tapp, some great swimmers of the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it kind of bridges really nicely into my question set here. So I noticed on one of your pages, you have a saying, and you seem to embody it with what you just said there. Better is always better, no matter the amount. Fail forwards, be brave, stay in the fight. What does that mean for you?
So for me, I always think back to when I made the pledge that I was going to go to the Olympics. I mean, I wanted that T-shirt. Now, I had no clue what it meant, but I wanted the shirt. I thought Graham Smith, when he won his silver, when the relay won the silver, I just wanted to do that. That was the coolest thing for me. I had no idea that, it was 4 people out of 30 million that got to do that. I thought I just went up to the pool and we raced. And if you'd have looked at the group that I was in and said, who's going to go to the Olympics and lined us all up, certainly the short, blind kid with asthma and 1 lung, that's not the kid you pick, right? But I really wanted to go. And that dream of going allowed me to go to meets and fail and lose and lose and lose and lose all the way up till I was 16 years old and just say, no, I want to go I don't care if I lose now, I want to go. And so to me, I've never been afraid of bad mistakes and failing miserably because I knew it was part of me getting to where I wanted to go. And the culmination of the Olympics in '84, really, there was some nightmares before that. In 1983, I drowned in a race at Pan Americans against some good competition. Like, in the race, you're trying to go against the world record holder and then you drown. It's not great on the CV, right? It's not good on your resume when they fish you out and take you to the hospital. What happened? Well, you didn't die in the 200 AM. You died in the 200 AM, 200 fly, I should say. And so then, a year later, I made the team. And that was the culmination of the dream, making the team and getting to go. And then, of course, I got in with Mike West, who was a bronze medalist, and Victor, who was a gold and bronze medalist, and Sandy was a finalist. And yeah, we just put it together. We won our silver medal by 1/100th. And that team got together basically 3 years later. We took Mark to experience instead of Mike West, but 3 of us and Mark won a silver again in '88. And then replacing Victor with John. Some different people on the roster, but we won a bronze in '92, and so pretty exciting. I never got that gold medal, but I don't know that was ever my dream. My dream was the T-shirt and going, and representing and racing hard. So perfection has never been the goal for me. The thing is just keep falling forward, just get a little bit better. Better is always better, and never measure yourself up against anybody else. and be standing when the smoke clears. My first national medal was because the top 2 guys in Canada got a cold and didn't compete. And that meant that it was wide open for the rest of us to win because they were so much better than us. They were 2-3 seconds faster than us. Well, if you take them out, we're all the same. And on that day, I happened to be the best of the rest and won my medal.
Obviously, a lot of that comes from your natural personality. How much of that, and how does that form around your coaching philosophy nowadays, and how you bring that message to kids?
Well, I try to protect my guys from becoming perfectionists. I try to protect them from putting too much into the results. I mean, to me, it's process, and team, because the team will take some of the pain and some of the actual heartache out of not doing well, because they're all going to come up, tell you that you can do better, and then promise to help you do better. So the team's important. And I think that the reason that I made it was I had coaches that believed in me before I believed in me. I mean, I certainly looked in the mirror and saw the short blind kid with one lung when I looked in the mirror. I didn't see someone going to the Olympics. And one of the problems that I have when I talk to people about what I did as a door opener is they see that and then they see me and they say, well, that doesn't add up, right? How did the short blind kid with one lung go to 3 Olympics and win a medal in each one? But that's what it ended up as. That's not how it started. It started with me, getting kicked out of workout. It started with me being one of 5 guys in the lane and the other 4 were in the newspaper. I was cropped out with my hand on a shoulder, you know what I mean? So I try to tell them and I try to get them to embody the pursuit of excellence and to embody the pursuit of that dream, but also with flexible, balanced life, because it's not everything. But to keep the dream alive and to protect them from feeling too bad when they do fail, allowing them to fail, learn the lesson and move on. So the process, keeping stuck on the process.
That ability to make sure that the athletes have what they need and they can follow that is so crucial, right? Because oftentimes, they do get caught up in, and I remember from my years of coaching, like an athlete will fixate, I need to get to this time. If I can only get to this meet, then I'm good enough. And they get there and they get to the next, then I'm good enough. And now I'm good enough. And the reality is, kind of like what you're saying, and it's a common theme with a lot of people we interview on the show, is that, and I'll steal words from my last guest, Alex Serrano from Montreal, we're a school for life, right? We provide a service for life, right? And it really is that. Like you're giving them a set of skills that regardless of where they go, they get onto it. So I want to transition on to, well, actually, I wanted to ask one question because you keep referring to yourself as a short blind kid with one lung. What was it like standing next to Michael Gross?
Oh, so I think probably the biggest eye-opener, the biggest moment of standing on the edge of the abyss and thinking, I am a complete fraud, was in the ready room, coming out behind Mikhail and looking in between his shoulder blades and looking up like he was ahead. He was 6'8". I'm 5'10". And I was like, why am I here? I don't belong with these guys. I'm not good enough to race them. I can't possibly beat them. They have everything going for them. And I wallowed in that just long enough for the 5'7" kid, John Sieben from Australia, to win the race and break the world record right beside me. And that was also a huge learning experience too. While I sat there moping, someone smaller than me actually beat the giant and broke the world record. And there's life lessons in every loss, every catastrophe that I was involved in was great, and I enjoyed them, but there was a learning lesson as well.
I want to talk about races.
Sure.
One pattern from all the archive races that I watched from 84, 88, 92, and I'm sure the pattern exists before that, is how you finished races, and not like yourself, but also the Canadian team. Like if you watch those relays, right, in every leg, Canada's behind at the start, finishes ahead at the end of the leg. Now, in 1984, that 4x1 medley relay was certainly a race of finishes, right? So like I said, all you guys you were ahead and then behind, or behind and then ahead, and so on and so forth. You all had incredible last 50s. kind of leading into or pulling from what I just asked. So on your leg specifically, you dove in, right? And you had taken the touch from Victor and you dove in. On your right, Mikael dove in, right? And so here's a guy who's, like you said, almost 2 feet taller, a foot and a half taller, right? He's coming after you on that first 50. On that second 50, like, you put the hammer down. So, I mean, like, that is more than just training. That is personal toughness. Where did
I
that
think,
come from?
well, we had I mean, that was a philosophy that we had, that in order to go fast, that your time had to degrade the slowest out of everybody else. You were going to die, but you wanted to die later and at a lesser degree than everyone else. And that did work very well for me. And for years, I mean, I swam 14 years at the international level. There was a couple races where other guys did a better job with it. John Sieben in that 200 fly is a perfect example. First guy to come back 29 seconds on the last 50 of a 200 fly. Did it right beside me. Thank you very much. And we were going 158. So we were going out 54, 55 and coming back 102, 103. He came back 29 seconds. It's pretty amazing 40 years ago. But that was the philosophy, was the even split by not dying as much as the rest, not degrading your time as much as the rest, not losing your stroke as much as the rest. That was an actual philosophy. And again, work that process. And it looks like it's toughness, but you've done it in workouts so many times that in reality, it kicks in automatically.
How much of that was from Derek? Because, I mean, you and Mark both swam in Calgary. That would have been a shared trait from training. I mean, obviously, Victor at the time, I think, was still in Sudbury. Not Sudbury. He was in Ontario. I don't remember exactly where.
At Region Waterloo.
Okay, there you go. So like, how much of that, I guess between a guy like Derek and a guy like Cliff Barry, who is Victor's coach, there must have been a lot of shared philosophies then, I guess. Did you know?
I do think so. There was definitely a lot of shit. Well, I think one of the things that was the beauty of the 80s, the 76 Olympics got everybody ready and primed to go. 78, when we kicked butt at Commonwealth Games. 80 would have been an incredible Olympics for us with multiple medals, including gold medals. 84, 23 medals. So that entire period, that 8-year period, all the coaches were super rivals, but super supportive of each other. They wanted to beat each other, but they were super supportive. And I do think that there was a little bit of Canada was slow on the first 50, but came back well. There was a little bit of that. And I think it worked. And I think that they inbred it into us, but eventually we also became sprinters. And now, you look at Penny, can sprint anything type of thing, right? Maggie's going out with the best. So we're better at the beginning, but there's, that period of time, that decade, we would go out, top 4, but come back on everyone.
And did you know
Curtis Myden's silver medals in his IMs, his fly, he was always behind on those flies.
Absolutely. Like a master at swimming from behind, which is for those that might not know, like it's almost like an art form to be able to, to do that, to be able to put the race together, knowing that you have, or your plan is anyways, doesn't always work out, to be able to deliver on the back end of that race. So did you know Cliff Barry at all?
Yeah, very much so. Well, we went on several teams together, several trips together, but because of the relays with Victor and Mike, and because Rowe with their 5 swimmers was as good as UCSC with our 25 mil swimmers, you get to know them, you get to talk to them, get to have lunch with them. And he was a much more, I would say he was more strict with his guys. He had a very, very thin line. His guidelines were a little bit tighter, or guideposts were a bit tighter than ours. But I really enjoyed him. And he was a master at handling Mike and Kevin Odger and Swanson and Vic, especially Vic. Just great personality, great relationship with them. He had built such a tight, caring and focused relationship that he was probably the only guy that could handle Vic. And it's amazing to see when you have a coach and a swimmer that are clicking. It's pretty amazing.
Sort of 76 through I would say kind of wraps up kind of in 92. That period, that 18-year period, is arguably Canada's best in the pool. Like, whether you look at medal count, whether you look at success in number of finals and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a little bit of a two-part question. So one, what do you think drove that? And do you think that the degradation of whatever that was is in any way connected to, missing the 80 Olympics? Did we lose a generation of athletes that weren't inspired or missed a step because there were no Olympics in 80 for us anyways? What made that group of swimmers like yourself and, like even going as far back as like the Cheryl Gibsons and so on and so forth, like what made that generation what it was? Because it really is something special when you go back and you look at the history of swimming in this country.
Absolutely. And there was guys, through that entire period that competed through that entire period. Cheryl Gibson is one of those, all the way up to 82. I think that the reason that we took off and we had that vertical improvement and we went from, I remember 1976 going around with a pin, I still have it, that said, "Go for it." And the I was a number one. And Canada's goal was to be the premier swimming nation. You can imagine the hubris, right? We're going to beat the Americans and the Australians and the Russians. But that's what we wanted to do. And there was a Sports Canada funding came in to help, it was a couple $100 a month, but it was to help defray some of the costs of living and training. And that was a big difference because there was no support. There was no endorsements. There was just no money, period. And you weren't allowed to have it even if it had been there because of the amateur status. So that 76 all the way up to 92 was an improvement on the dream. The coaches got better and better and better. The rivalries got better and better. The rivalries within Canada were amazing. We used to go down and race USC and UCLA and Stanford and Berkeley. And, we had no problem racing them because our coaches weren't afraid of any other team because of the rivalries within Canada. Paul Bergen, Dave Johnson, Tom Johnson. And Cliff. There was just no fear at all. It was all new. It was all exciting. And everybody was going vertically better. We got more world records. We did well on the World Cup circuit when it was originally brought out in 88, 89. I think what then happened, I will agree that the guys in 80 who were on that vertical improvement curve, who didn't get to go, many of them did hang on to the 82 Commonwealth Games. And some to the 84, Wade Flemons, Cam Henning, Alex had been on the 80 team. So they managed to hang on, but they were hanging on at much later on at 24 years old, at 25 years old, which was unheard of back then. 22 was the average age for people to retire. So I think what happened was they were robbed at the peak. And to add to that it wasn't just going to be their peak meet. We were going to kick the hell out of that meet, right? It was in hometown. It was in, it was in Moscow. And we were going to go over there and that team could have won multiple medals. You think of Alex, he was going to win his races for sure. Stephen Pickell, Smiths. It was going to be amazing. Even Bill Sawchuk. It was going to be amazing. And it just never happened. So those guys, all that energy, that wind that was in that sails just disappeared. Some hung on, some coached, some kept swimming, but that wind disappeared. So the trajectory of that vertical improvement dropped a bit. What killed it, I believe, was in the late 90s or probably closer to 92, 94, when they got rid of the amateur status and things changed with NC2As and many, many, many more countries went into the NC2A program. So you had, instead of 18 countries winning medals, you had 50 countries winning medals. Instead of 8 countries winning gold medals, you had 18 countries winning gold medals. Like Suriname, like Anthony Nesty, right, from Suriname wins gold medal on the 100 fly. How, what? Where? What? And he swims in Florida. He's always been in Florida, but he swims, NC2A swimming in Florida with the Gators, and that's how he improved and won. So that was a huge difference because Canada had just taken all of not all, but many of the student athletes out of the States and brought them back into the Canadian university system. And we lost out the fact that the rest of the world went to the NC2A system. The other thing was the money. So in 94, they got rid of amateur status, and countries that had money did better. They kept their athletes longer. They paid them off when they did well for their successes. And that was an entirely different atmosphere. And Canada was just a bit behind the curve the whole time for quite some time, probably, as late as 2008. We've now caught up, with our high performance centers, with the carding, with the super cards, with the money available on the World Cup circuit, with the ISL. Now it's a level playing field again. But there was a little bit of a missed generation or two. One from the wind dropping out of the sails, the lack of the energy from those guys that would have carried on, the loss of the competition because NC2As, or the dilution of the competition because NC2As, then the money. And so now we have, our older summers are in there too. 25, 27 is not unusual at all now.
It's not a coincidence that as the money started to come back and as Canada started to become more proactive on the funding side of things, that we started to see results return, with the girls in Toronto and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely.
So, yes, I mean, obviously very good. I wanted to ask you about one of your teammates in 1984, and I found this curious as I was doing my research and prep for this, because it seemed like this guy was a ghost. Like he showed up just before the Olympics, and then any profile information you look for him after, it's a blank. Like there's no picture, there's no information, nothing. What do you remember about a guy like by the name of Peter Ward?
So Peter was a great competitor out of North York, and he brought the fly from the George Nagy days. He brought the fly from 203, 202, 200 fly. 203, 202 brought it right down to 2 minutes. So he took 2 to 3 seconds off the Canadian record. Would have done well again at the 80 games. It just didn't happen. But when he showed up at the 84 Olympic trials, he was still the Canadian national record holder, still a force to be reckoned with. He had gone to the school in the States. And I happened to beat him on that day. I did win that race and brought the national record down to 158. So then he goes to the Olympics with me, went 159, which is great. Then he won, I think, the 100 fly at the 84 nationals, but came second in the 200 fly. He moved to, I think, Etobicoke. And then, again, carding and money and everything wasn't around. And he moved on with his life, right? So, he did try in 88 again. He came back in 88, much older now, probably 24 years old, I think. And he hit the water bad. His arms split, his goggles came off, and he just, he didn't make the team, which you can imagine at that level, at that time, you don't make the team if everything goes wrong, right? And so then he fell off of the radar for national level swimming. But I mean, I have to thank him for dragging that time down from 203 to 202 and keeping to hiring that, raising that bar all the time for Canadian flyers and being around to race. It helped me for sure.
I was not able to find anything on him anywhere, and he obviously played a role for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And played a role for Canada. I mean, like there were 2 Canadians in that 200 fly final, right? And since then, I don't know when the last Canadian was to final in the 200 fly after you, to be honest. I know that I
did it with John Kelly in 88.
Yeah.
Shamak Patucha, I think, did.
Did he?
Yeah, I think so. He brought the record down again. So it was his record after that. He went, 53 low and 157. So I think he finaled or got a second swim anyways. He was a great flyer. He was a fantastic flyer.
I mean, I'll make sure to mention him in the show notes and stuff like that and recognize that, because I want to make sure we honor people correctly that have been, or recognize people correctly that have made those achievements. So I wanted to talk to you about your 200 fly in 88. So, I mean, we talked about racing. We talked about how you race. You talked about the ability to come back. I mean, like, that was a gutsy last 50 coming from lane one. And like, you were like, you know, and I say this in all honor and recognition and celebration, like, you missed the podium by a fingernail, right? Like, it was a gutsy last 50, like, you crushed it, like, you know. And like, watching that, like, I still had goosebumps watching it yesterday, right?
Oh yeah. I cry. I find that.
What's that?
I cry when I watch it.
Well, I mean, you know, I think about, you know, like watch, because I watch things now differently than I would have watched, you know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago as a kid, you know, like, so as a kid, you know, unrelated to swimming, like, I remember when Ben Johnson lost his medal, like, I cried for 3 days, you know. And, you know, when I watch things now, like, I appreciate it. Like, I watch that race, I break it down. It's like, holy cow, man. Like, that was an amazing last 50. Like, it was a tough field, right? It was a tough field.
I think for me the biggest thing about that race, that was going to be my race. So I was 23 years old, or just turned 23 years old. And I was super, super confident. I had no fear. I had no negative thoughts in my head at all. I had beaten Mikhail head-to-head in races. I had beaten Anthony Moss head-to-head in races. I had beaten Benny Nielsen at the U.S. Nationals head-to-head. So I didn't fear them. I mean, they obviously had, you know, Anthony had beaten me at the Commonwealth Games. They had a reputation, and Benny was obviously up there in the European Championships. And Mikhail was a god. But I didn't fear them. So I really thought that I could take that race. And after the first 100, I couldn't believe that I just wasn't competitive. I was virtually shocked. And I did breathe to that side on the wall to check out where everyone was, and thought, oh, what happened here? So the third 50 was reflection. And then the last 50 was why, you know, you've let this go. Why would you let this go? It's still an opportunity to do it. So I did catch, I did catch them up, and other people degraded more, right? Other people fell off the speed more and lost their stroke more. But I lost 30 meters or 40 meters letting them get away. And I regret it to this day. It was self-inflicted. I could have, I think I was 4 or 5 tenths out of a medal. And anybody who's been to the Olympics will tell you gold is fantastic. Bronze, everyone's like, whoa, you got into the medals. Silver's like, you didn't win. And fourth place is, were you at the Olympics? You know, like the other 5 people didn't try to get in there. So it was pretty painful. And of course, with the medley relay coming up, Tewksbury had come 5th, 4th for Vic. I think it was 23rd for Sandy. And if you add those up, you know, you've got 4th and 5th and 5th and 23rd. This does not a world record gold medal relay make. And Vic was so mad about not getting his medal that he all day just kept telling us, we're winning this thing. We're winning this. We didn't have a great strategy. The strategy was go as fast as we can, try to freak out the Yanks so they jumped. And when they got DQ'd, we'd win. But he was very, very vocal, very, very active in making us excited about that next race. So my 200 fly, as sad as I am that I let that race go for 30 meters, it woke me up to when Victor lit the fire. I was there. I was like, absolutely, we're doing this. It doesn't matter that the Americans have 4 world record holders. It doesn't matter that the Russian team is better than us. It doesn't matter that the Germans are. It doesn't matter Netherlands kicked our butt. It doesn't matter that Britain beat us on 2 of the 4 legs. We're going to win this thing because they're getting DQ'd. It was a bit of a dream. But right up to, and again, that's another place where I walked out behind Mikhail. And that time I didn't care. That time I didn't care that I was behind him, because I didn't care. I was just going to beat whoever I needed to beat. And of course I dove in with Yaroshuk after Volkov and Victor had their race off. Victor reeled in Volkov. And so I had a chance, and I caught up to Yaroshuk, took him down, and then Pagoda against Sandy. Sandy, again, went out nice and average, but came back like unbelievable. And with 25 years to go, he passed them. And, all told, he ended up with a silver medal again. And just all of it was due to Victor's belief and Victor lighting that fire under people that felt badly about not performing.
In that one response, you summed up almost everything that you've said, you've learned from your career and so on and so forth. In a race, you were able to self-correct and so on and so forth and respond, right? And I'm sure, it's very different, you being in the race versus, other people watching the race. But like I tell you, I watched that race yesterday and I was like, oh my God, that was a gutsy last 50. Holy cow. To come back like that, to make that, to address the negative self-talk mid-race, midstream, mid-stride, right? And go forward and make the correction from there, right? I mean, I hope it means something to you, that it still gives me goosebumps watching.
Yeah, as well. I do obviously wish that the outcome had been different, but I'm glad that I stuck to the idea of do what you can do and be standing here when the smoke clears. When we touch the wall, then we're going to measure and see what happened. But don't lose the plan. Don't lose the process. Don't forget what you know how to do and what you want to do. Until we get to the wall, we'll measure it then. Don't measure it now. And, at the end of the day, coming fourth on the 200 fly was a nice thing.
Front page of the Montreal Gazette the morning after you guys won was the picture of, I think it's Victor on the block screaming his head out. And I mean, you and Mark are in the background and Sandy's coming into the wall. Legendary picture. Legendary.
Yeah.
So
my favorite part of that picture is right behind me is Volkov, who Victor had beaten. And Volkov has now realized what's going to happen. And he is deflated. Like he's just looking, going, we've lost this race. And then juxtaposed against that is a timer, or I guess he might have been a stroke judge, going, this is another job, this is another race. And then you see Victor threatening bodily harm to Sandy as he comes in. Tube spree, just screaming. You can see every vein in his body's full. And I've just come around the back and I realize what's happened, and I'm just starting to get into the celebration.
Well, but that was Victor's legacy. I mean, Victor was, I've never met Victor. He swam at Point Claire. I was taking swimming lessons at that time.
Okay.
So I remember him jumping, the wall, I think he was lifeguarding or teaching or something like that, in and around what he was doing. But that said, his reputation was always, this fiery and this one of, fiery passion and, win at all costs and stuff like that, and only amplified, there's not many swimming movies, but the original Fast and the Furious, not Absolutely. The Dominic Toretto one, the original one with Alex and Victor, and they show, kind of a little bit of, the combative nature that he had and so on and so forth. So I can see that and I appreciate that.
And he did it. That was there's very few stories I've heard about Victor that some of them are inaccurate, but very few of them miss the idea that if you were around him, you caught fire too. My first world record was because Victor came and sat behind me in the stands and said, "Didn't you break the world record yet? Haven't you tried this before?" And I thought, what? They're not easy to break. And he said, go break the world record. Let's go. We'll have beer and pizza. Huh? All right. And, any nonsense that was in my head was gone. I broke a world record about 10 minutes later. And that was Vic. I mean, there's very little about his passion, and you call it passion. He was a student of the sport. He watched videos like we watch now. You can imagine 40 years ago trying to find a video of a swimmer. YouTube didn't exist. The internet didn't exist. So he was a student. He knew what was going on. He wanted to be the best, and he studied the best. And I can just imagine VHS tapes getting erased and demagnetized as he watched his competitors on the way to his world records and his fame.
It was just the 86 around there that Victor met with tragedy. He was hit by a car and passed away.
Yeah, and so this was about 6.5 months after that incident where he told me to break the world record. We had gone to the World Cup. And when we came back, that's when he said, "Didn't you break this? I thought you had broken this already, right?" So about 6 months later, I decided not to go to Japan that year with the Canadian national team. And I went and spent that summer with Vic in Montreal. And upon coming home, I came home in September and, he passed away at the end of October. just before Remembrance Day, just maybe November 7th, something like that. And it was completely out of nowhere. Like, just, it was such a shock.
Like the news was very, was covered very closely. And being a young swimmer at the time, you obviously, very, emotional for a young kid to deal with, right? So,
and he was the first big celebrity swimmer in Canada to retire, right? So Alex had to stop because of his injuries. He had gone to the 87 Pan Pac, so he had a subluxing shoulder. Everybody knows the story. Anyways, he had to stop. His injuries were too much. Graham Smith, because of the boycott of the 80 Olympics, a lot of those guys stopped because that was their peak. They were ready to go. It didn't happen. Then what do? What's the booby prize? What's the consolation prize? So a lot of them left that way. So Vic was the first guy to retire on top of his game, everybody knew who he was. And he was the first guy to stop and say, okay, I'm coming to my new chapter in life, and I'm going to run this water security lifeguard, it was all around the pool, this business. And months later, gone.
Yeah.
So those of us that were getting ready to retire were like, ooh, what happens when you retire? We just didn't know. And now if you look, that's 30 years ago. Look at Michael Phelps' book. Look at Elizabeth Beisel's book. There's a lot of stuff to learn from the guys that retired. It's not all fun and games. There's a lot that goes on, the ups and the downs and everything. It's great now because you can read books by these guys, but there weren't a lot of books of how to deal with it and what happened and the reality of the top racing after the best.
You went, I guess, two-part question. So to 92, Marcel, in the years before that, kind of came onto the scene, and it was almost, if I may say, in a way of paying homage, like you kind of passed the torch on to him a little bit.
Well, he grabbed it.
He grabbed it, but it was still so 1992. You passed the torch on to him, or you grabbed it, whatever the case was. That was your last Olympics. What did you do when you went away from swimming? Because I know that you were you went into the private world for a bit, and then you jumped into coaching after that. So how did you handle that retirement transition, and then what drew you to coaching?
Those are excellent questions. So when I stopped in 92, I thought I had stopped. I was 27 years old. I had given as many kicks at the cat as I could. I had, the world records. I'd been to the Olympics. I'd done everything. I had that T-shirt that I really, really wanted. So I retired and came back for about 4 months, went back to school. And around Christmas time, so only months later, started to get a bit bored. I mean, there was 40 hours a week that I wasn't training or doing dry land or hanging around the swimmers. And Derek asked me if I wanted to coach. And I thought, no way in hell am I getting on a pool deck again. I've done this. I don't want to be involved with swimming. And he said, well, we have 3 relays going to nationals. Maybe you could come swim a couple times a week and then go on that 3rd relay, and maybe they could, get us some points. So I thought, well, that's fair. I'm a little bit bored. So I went and I trained, 5 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week. And I wasn't out of shape yet. It'd only been a few months, and went to those nationals. And turns out, no, Derek had entered me in everything, like 100, 200 free, 100, 200 fly, 200 IM. I was on all the A relays just to put pressure on me to participate at a higher level. So what I thought was going to be a paid vacation turned out to be another nationals. And so I won the 3 butterfly races there against Darren and Marcel and Blas Milcherny. And I thought, well, I do love the sport. It is inside me. There's no faking it. I wasn't going to let them win, even though I was out of shape. I mean, I was 5 pounds overweight, and the suit made me look weird, and I was white as a ghost. I was this big white whale out there, right? But it was inside me. I really still loved the sport and what it had given me. So I ended up coaching the next year, 93, 94 season, and while I was working. And I did that. I coached and worked all the way up to 2008. And then I just worked. I was in the oil and gas industry. And then I started coaching again just before I came here in 2015. Started coaching at the Calgary the Calgary Winter Club, and then came here because Charlottetown Bluefins had a position open, and I always wanted to be out east, and I was thinking of retiring out east, so it all worked out. But yeah, my transition away from the sport was not, okay, I'm done with the sport, now what? It was, tripped over myself and tripped over my goggles to get back on the deck. And it turns out I did love coaching. He was right. Derek was right. So I would say for my detraining, though, we now have people come in and we sort of talk to them after they retire, and this is what you need to do for your CV. This is what you need to do for your training. This is how to work with food. This is who you are. We do a good job of, basically debriefing them in Canada. And the first time that I did it, I was the stark warning of don't do what he did and quit and don't do anything. And then those hours fill up with nonsense, and then you're lost. And who are you without the sport, etc. We see that now, right? We see a couple of incidents just lately, right? Just in the United States, we see a couple of incidents of swimmers that get lost. They don't know what they're doing without the sport. And tragically, bad things can happen. Most of the time it doesn't, and they catch themselves, and someone, picks them up and says, okay, the things that you learned are transferable, but sometimes they fall through the cracks. And I wish everybody that retires does hook up with one of those programs and, detrains and debriefs and, basically just depressurizes after that chase of that massive dream. Unlike some of us did. And I had no idea what to do because the only guy I'd ever seen retire died months later. And then Tewksbury, who retired, he ended up going on the speaking circuit. So if you talk to him, you'll find that he went on the speaking circuit and put as much energy into that as he was in swimming. And he did like 52 major speeches in the year after he retired. And he's just crashed. Like you'll have to talk to him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he crashed. Like it really, really hurt him to stretch himself that thin, but he was on a roll, and that's what he knew how to do, right? Get your teeth in and keep going. And he had a bit of a crash at the end of it. He was very tired of it and just didn't want to do it anymore, forgot his speech, things like that. You'll have to talk to him. It's a very interesting story.
Oh, no, it's been absolutely fabulous. I got a few questions to wrap this up. You had a history-making career, as I said at the beginning. Like one, if not the only Canadian swimmer to medal in 3 consecutive Olympic Games.
So far.